Okay. All right, so what we're going to do is we are going to make a custom brush today. Now, there's a couple different ways to do this. I'll show you guys the way I think works the best. So custom brushes can be used for anything from creating a logo or a watermark brush really simply, so you can just hit it on your images while you're in Photoshop. Or I have retouching friends who have made custom brushes for skin textures and things like that. So any kind of range of stuff. So what I want you guys to kind of do is have some fun with it. You can actually use other photographs. You can be kind of cheeky with it. I had one student made clouds once. It actually worked out pretty cool. So I'm going to show you kind of the principles of how it works and then kind of play with it a little bit more. So the first thing you want to do is you want to open a new document and you want to make it, thinking about it, there we go. You want to make it pixels. Like I said, bear with me because I haven't done this in a while. Do 1,000 pixels on each side so it's square. And you want it at 300 resolution. Okay, so having it at 300 resolution is important because you want to be able to expand or contract the size of the brush. So you want to start with making your brush actually a lot larger than you're really going to need it to be, so that you can go down as opposed to going up and making it smaller and making it have like it falls apart. So if we look at this, this is actually going to be about 3 by 3 inches. That's actually a pretty good size for a brush. So I'm going to hit OK, and I'm going to make sure the background is white.
Is your height supposed to be 30,000?
No, it is not. Good catch. There we go. So I'm going to hit OK, so I just get a white square. Now the principle of how this works is Photoshop wants this to be a black and white image, document, drawing, what have you. Black is going to be where it puts down whatever color the brush is then used in at 100%, where white is not putting down any color. Okay, so let me show you guys a really quick example. So I'm going to use a black paintbrush, and I'm going to make just some lines here really quickly. So I'm going to make, oops, there we go. Now you're working on the layer here. So I'm going to make just some different lines. Make my brush size a little bit larger. So there's black at 100%. There we go. Now I'm just going to take down my opacity to 75%. I'm going to draw. I'm going to now go down to 50%. Draw. And I'm going to go down to about 25%. 25%. And I'll draw some over here, but I'm going to leave some white. Now notice this overlapped in certain places, but we have essentially 100, 75, 50, 25, and 0, okay? So what you then do is you're going to go to Edit, Define Brush Presets, all right? And this is where you name the brush, and it will save locally. It's only going to save on this computer, okay? If you want to keep the brushes, you have to export the brush packet. We'll talk about that later. But it will only save locally, so it's not going to save on everything. So I'm just going to call this test. All right, so I'm going to hit OK. Now, when I go to the brush palette, it should, brush palette, bring that up. So I have this big honkin' square. I'm going to pop over to another image, not this one. Pop over to my kind of drawing image. And this is the brush at basically 1,000 pixels, so really large. And then I can scale it up or down depending upon the size I want it to be. There we go. I'm going to make it a little bigger so you guys can see it a little bit better. And now if I click this, it's putting down whatever color in that 100%. Oops, make sure my brush is at 100% there. There we go. 100, 75, 50, 25. And then notice there's nothing around the edges because I left it all white. So if I change this to red, if I change this to red, and I'm actually in an image that is in RGB, there we go. Now I'll get the red in that particular fashion. Does this make sense? Yes? It'll take the shape of whatever you have designed over here. So if I want to, let's start back with nothing here. If I want to make something that's going to be a round brush, all right, so let me just, as opposed to making a new document, I'm just clearing this out really quickly. So if I want to make a round brush, I'm going to do it this way. And remember, black and white. Because if you use color, it's going to translate that color to whatever its grayscale equivalent is. Okay, so if you put down red, it's not like your brush is going to automatically put down red color. It's going to translate to the grayscale equivalent. So I'm going to make sure I'm using black or white or whatever. So I'm going to make, hang on, there we go. Actually, it's easier if I do it this way. All right, so if I do something like this, exit, yep, brush preset. Okay, and then if I pop back over, you'll see there's my brush. Again, I need to be in color. There we go. Okay. Yep, so you're actually going to edit, define brush preset. Okay, so once you have your brush made, let me make a new document so you guys can kind of see what we're doing here. This is just for me to kind of show you some things, so I'm just going to make it 10 by 8 just for ha-has. So there's my brush. Now remember, I put this, if we go back over here, I put this down all at 100%. If I wanted to make this so it looked like he maybe had a little shadow, let me go back to a gray. I could use that same brush and do something like that, so it looks like maybe he's a shadow. All right, does that make sense? I'm going to just do that edit brush preset again. I'm going to call it smile shadow. And come back to this. So now if I use the smile shadow brush, which is my second one, I get that action. Let's do it in green. Okay, so I have the lesser opacity on top, the stronger opacity on the bottom. Kind of fun, right? But the interesting thing about some of the brush tools is the brush palette. So you guys don't really play a whole lot with the brush palette, and I want to kind of talk about it today because you can do some really fun things. Let me get rid of all my little fellas over here, and I'm going to show you guys this. So the brush palette is an extension of what you got going on, up here. So over here we have obviously size, but we also have the ability to rotate the brush. And I don't want to do that right yet. We also have the ability to rotate the brush using this tool here. We can flip it on its axis, so I can flip it so it's backwards. So let me bring my size back down so you guys can see. Oop, too small. There we go. So it's now backwards. If I flip it the other way, it's now back to forward. Okay, so I'm just going like this, flipping it forward to backwards. I can also, like I said, rotate it, so I can change the angle that the brush is being used, and I can also flip it upside down. Okay, so I can flip it backwards, upside down, all sorts of fun angles, and then rotate it. The other thing that's nice about this is I can skew my brush. So right now it's looking flat. It's parallel to my page, if you will. If I want to make it look like it has depth, I can take this and move this at an angle, so I now look like I have a disc that's going through the air or something like that. So it looks like it's maybe flat on the ground, or if I turn it sideways, maybe it's flat on a wall, and I can make a little face box here or something. Okay, so it has the ability to make it look more three-dimensional by skewing this guy. Now, in addition to all this, I'm going to erase out my my smiley faces so we can start over again here. In addition to all of this, I'm going to leave him back to normal. I'm going to put my angle back to 0, and that's going to bring it back to where it normally starts. So I back to nothing. In addition to this, we have all of these options up here. So before you guys saw, I turned on spacing, and then I turned on smooth. Spacing, right now, if I draw with this, I get kind of this action. Spacing is going to allow for how far apart those guys go, how often they're put down. So I'm still drawing just a solid line, but they're being put down way more infrequently than if I have my spacing way shorter, and now I get like a big line of smudge, okay? So a lot of these different presets are going to allow you to do a bunch of different things with the brush, okay? Shape dynamics is going to change, in this case, the size. So now it's going to go smaller or larger. Let me put my spacing back wider so you guys can see. All right, so spacing's wider, come back to shape dynamics. So size jitter is going to change the size of the image. See how it's getting bigger, and now it's getting back smaller, and it's getting bigger. Okay, anything with jitter is usually going to change the size, the angle, the shape, the color, something like that with the brush. And the higher the jitter is, the percentage-wise, the further that goes. All right, angle jitter is going to change the rotation. So let me put size jitter back down to nothing. I'm going to put angle jitter about 50%, and you can see how my size is now staying the same, but the angle at which the brush is being displayed is different. This is really useful if you want to use some of the cheesy brushes, like where is it? Here we go, the leaves. All right, so the leaves come preset with a whole bunch of its own little action, all right? But you can actually change, and notice the size jitter is all the way up. The angle jitter is all the way up. If I don't want that, I can just make it one way, so all the leaves are now facing the same direction. The leaf brush is one of those that constantly is changing all of these kind of shape dynamics and jitters and things like that. If we come in here, and scattering is how far or close together they are. So if we look, there's nothing. We put this up, we're getting a lot more leaves. And then how close together or how far apart they are. So if I make my count really low and my scatter really wide, my leaves are going much wider distribution, okay? They're under the brush presets in here. They're just a custom brush that they've made. It's really just a good brush to show you guys this example with. All right, so that's the scattering option. And of course, you can turn all of these on and off. All right, texture, let me get back to 0 here. Oops, too far. There we go. So texture, I don't really think this plays a whole lot into this particular brush. I haven't used the texture very often. I don't think it's going to apply to you too much. Dual brushes allow you to choose 2 that it'll scatter between, if I'm not mistaken. So let's take a look. I have this leaf brush, and I can choose this other leaf brush. Let's turn my... There we go. And I should be able to choose both of these. Of course, it's making a liar out of me today. Usually because something does make a liar out of me. Color dynamics is actually the most fun, in my opinion, especially for the leaf brush, because it does that jitter between 2 colors. So I'm going to do red and green so you guys really have a good distinction. So foreground background jitter right now is on nothing, so I'm just using the foreground color. And notice hue jitter is slightly up, so I'm getting a bunch of different greens, okay? Kind of cool if you want, some actual more realistic looking leaves or grass or what have you. Bring that hue jitter down, I'm just gonna get that kind of one shade of green, okay? Now, if I go with foreground background jitter, I'm gonna get between the green and the red. If I go all the way up to 100%, I should actually get green and red leaves. So I have full green, full red, and then any tone in between, okay? So the higher this is up, the more color we get. So this is where it's kind of fun. You can do your yellow, and you'll get kind of a fall leaf. Or if you do the green, kind of like we had a minute ago, you can get kind of a springtime looking leaf, okay, or what have you. Like I said, the leaf brush is kind of fun for this. All right, so that's the foreground background jitter. We talked about the hue jitter. Again, the higher the hue jitter, the more color you're going to get. So if I go all the way up, yay, rainbows. If I go about halfway, I'm going to get something in that green, analogous green colors range. Saturation jitter is going to, again, I'm going to put everything back to 0, change the, let me put this a little bigger so you guys can see it better too. Change the saturation so we have more or less opacity for each kind of pass. So we can see there I have, it looks like some are further away, some are different colors. So that's your saturation. Same with brightness, and the purity has to do with actually the color of the image. So the color dynamics is actually really kind of fun. Brush pose I'm not going to worry too much about, or transfer with you I'm not going to worry too much about, noise I'm not going to worry too much about. Wet edges are interesting. Let me put my color dynamics back down to pretty much nothing. Okay, I'm going to take that off. Wet edges make it look like, and I'm going to go back to my face brush for this, the original one. Make it look more like spray paint. All right, come back here. And of course, it's, again, making a liar out of me. It should make it look like it's actually dripping around the edges, and I'm not quite sure why it's not working at this moment. Probably because, let's try a different brush here. Nope. It should make it look like more like spray paint. Yeah, that one's not working on there. Let's turn it on actually. There we go. So you got to use the airbrush style brush. So look how it's, can you guys see that? How it's got that line around the edge versus, sorry, you want me to pick a different color? Versus, there we go, that one's solid, okay? So it's more of like a paint look, like you're building up spray paint if you were actually spray painting something along the edge. So that's your wet edges, and it actually kind of makes for a neat. Yeah, you got to use the airbrush for that. I knew there was a thing that was like, it has to be one of these kind of airbrushy looking ones, okay? I don't know if it'll actually allow for this to have a wet edge look. Let's see. I'm going to get back to 0 here. Got to turn it on first. Yep, that's actually pretty cool. So that looks like a wash almost. You can actually see that it's got a little bit more buildup on the edge. Let's do it in black so we can see what happens here. Yeah. So there's your wet edge look on one of the angled brushes. And of course, this is the paintbrush style one, so I think it actually works pretty well. It's working. Let's see, try this one. A little bit. I actually like this one better without it, but I still think it works. But this guy definitely works really well with that wet edge look because it makes it look, come on. There we go. Makes it look more like a wash than an actual just kind of funky shaped brush. All right, so there's your wet edges. The buildup also should have kind of that ability to kind of layer over. See how it's kind of where it's drawing, it's building up the color. That's going to happen pretty much almost with this kind of stuff anyway. Smoothing is the edges. Let me go back to a normal brush. And let me clear this out for you guys. I'm going to do erase because it's wrong button. Here we go. All right, come back to smoothing, go back to my brush. And that is going to have to do with, oops. Has to do with how the edges work, but, and then protect texture, you guys aren't going to have to worry about that. Most of the stuff that you guys are going to want to pay attention to are, one, I like the wet edges look for when you're trying to paint things, especially a drawing that you may have done. I think personal aesthetic, I think it looks kind of cool. And then the color dynamics and then the shape dynamics are going to be the ones that you really kind of want to pay attention to for when you're using your own custom brush or, kind of trying different things. It will allow for, yeah, it does look like a slinky. It'll allow for you guys to have a little bit more, just, kind of fun with things. So you can play with some of those scattering tools. Make this guy a little smaller. It's thinking about itself really hard, so let's turn the count down. And let's put on a color. Let's just do this. Damn it. Yep, it's hating me. There we go. So with that, that's the hue, hue jitter all the way up. So it just basically makes rainbows. And then scattering, I still want to turn the count down. And it's still just making a lot of them. I'm not quite sure why it's making so many. Oh, let's try that. There we go. There we go. So I put the spacing up higher, and it's making it a little less frequent because I spaced them out as opposed to got them really close together. Okay, so the whole making the custom brush, you're just making sure that you have black and white or some tonal quality. Okay, it can be round, it can be square, that's up to you. If you want your brush to be round, make sure that your corners don't have anything in them. Okay, this is 1,000 pixels at 300 ppi, and that's actually coming out, let's see, pretty decent. I mean, this guy's round, so it really doesn't matter. I mean, theirs getting larger than what we had, so it's kind of creepy. So this one's really not going to fall apart because it's just kind of lines. But at that point, it shouldn't fall apart past that. So make sure you're using, that you're creating this the way you want it, and then you're saving it under that edit define brush preset. Okay? Make sense? Okay.